To celebrate that yesterday was World Architecture Day and we like curious facts, we wanted to make a list of the most expensive infrastructure in the world. Surely, you have a lot of buildings in mind. Tell us in the comments if any of them are on this list of the most expensive infrastructure in the world. Before we start, please like and subscribe to this channel and then sit back and relax. Among the expensive and multi-million billion infrastructure in the world today, the International Space Station is said to be the world's most expensive, with a worth of $157 billion. Is it worth it? Let's check it out. After reaching the moon, making lunar orbits, traveling into space, and launching the rover to Mars, the dreams of decades of science fictions have been coming true over the years. One of them, building a habitable place for human beings in space, began to be prepared in the 80s, the International Space Station. The International Space Station, the largest structure ever put into orbit, is a model of international cooperation between the Russians and the Americans. Considered by many the greatest work of space engineering ever built, the International Space Station is a laboratory for space studies. Year after year, different space agencies, both public and private, send missions into space projects that keep humanity's adventure in space alive. The fate of many of these missions? The International Space Stations, or ISS for its acronym in English, International Space Station. ISS, the work of science. It is the largest man-made space construction, orbiting our planet for more than 20 years and located 400 km away from us. Discover in this video everything you need to know about the International Space Station, a giant of space research. How was the International Space Station built? The idea arose in the 1920s, the fruit of the creativity and ingenuity of the Russian scientist Tsiolkovsky. Later in 1960, NASA took up the idea to make this space project a reality one day. The challenge? Put a modular station in orbit. The first crew of the International Space Station took off on October 31, 1989, aboard a Soyuz spacecraft. It was made up of the Russians Yuri Gitzenko and Sergei Krikalev and the American William Shepard. Since then, a total of 58 missions have traveled and stayed there during these 20 years. At the moment, waiting to be replaced at the end of the year are the German Alexander Gerst, the American Serena Aunon-Chancellor, and the Russian Sergei Prokopyev. Denis Tito entered history as its first space tourist. He paid more than $20 million to travel in April 2001. Anousheh Ansari, an American of Iranian origin, became the first female tourist to do so in 2006. The American Scott Kelly and the Russian Mikhail Kornienko broke the record for spending between 2015 and 2016 for 340 consecutive days. In 1984, the then President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, asked NASA that in 10 years it should be built a space station. In 1998, Russia, through its agency Roscosmos, launched the first module of what would become the International Space Station. Later, other countries joined, such as Canada, Japan, and several Europeans working under the European Space Agency. All of them are the ones who currently controls the International Space Station, whose weight is almost 500 tons and whose size is similar to that of a football field, about 100 meters long and 80 meters wide. It revolves around the Earth at about 28,000 kilometers per hour, thus completing 16 orbits a day. We had to wait for the collapse of the Soviet Union for relations between the Russians and the Americans to improve, to see far-reaching space collaborations. As a result of this new collaborative era and a shared feeling of thinking big, the United States and Russia decided to take up Tsiolkovsky's theory to create a colossal, unique, and unprecedented space project. They were helped in their efforts by other great space powers such as Canada, Brazil, Japan, and France. All these countries signed an agreement on January 29, 1998, which would lay the foundations for the operation and birth of the International Space Station. That same year, on November 20th, the launch of the Russian module Zarya inaugurated the constructions in orbit of the ISS. This module was followed by the North American-made Unity. It took up to 40 more launches, both Russian and American, to put the entire project into orbit. Now it can be seen from our planet if you know how to see the International Space Station. Apart from certain technical problems during space flights to and from the ISS, which at one time meant the sad loss of several astronauts, the project also encountered many complications during the constructions of the station itself. Scientists from all over the planet had to collaborate, and to do so, they had to overcome cultural, linguistic, and logistical elements. It may seem banal, but keep in mind that there are many times that we find scientists using units of measurement other than the international metric system. To prevent these issues, it was decided to establish a shared digital workspace that would reflect the spirit of cooperations and collaborations among scientists and researchers from around the globe. ISS, a unique and exceptional construction. As of today, the International Space Station is made up of 13 modules, not counting some modules that have been launched experimentally. Its weight reaches 400 tons, floating at an altitude of 400 km and moving at an average speed of 27,600 km per hour. The budget was pharaonic because although there is no exact data on the cost, estimates calculate that around $150 billion were necessary to develop, build, and put the project into orbit. As a result of cooperative management, the budget was created. 5 of the top space agencies in the world, NASA, Roscosmos, ESA, JAXA, and CSA, co-manages the International Space Station. The prior 5 states deserve special mention among the 15 cooperating states who jointly fund the budget. In general, NASA, and to a much lesser extent, Roscosmos, are responsible for covering the majority of the costs. What role does the International Space Station play? We are accustomed to the notion or the perception that these kinds of spaces or rooms serves as refuge for prospective survivors of an apocalyptic event on Earth. It discusses the significant impact science fiction film has had on our perceptions of space challenges. Nothing could be further from the truth, though, as the International Space Station serves a quite different purpose altogether as the world's largest space laboratory. To learn more about space, thousands of experiments have been conducted on board the station. It is incredibly challenging to do these experiments here on Earth. The research being done on the International Space Station is related to a variety of highly specialized disciplines, including astronomy, botany, chemistry, and the behavior of fluids and materials. To research animal behavior in space or the development of crops, the ISS, for instance, feature greenhouses and aquariums. An uncertain future. Both NASA and ESA would like to continue the venture until 2030, but the Russians announced in July that they want to pull out after 2024. For now, this has not been made official. The situation in Ukraine is not strange to this announcement, although Moscow had already suggested that it would withdraw to build its orbital station. A departure from Russia would force the Americans to take over all supply flights and in-orbit maintenance of the station, as the lab slowly but steadily decrease in altitude. After 2030, the ISS will be precipitated into the ocean and must be replaced by private stations. NASA has already invested in several of these projects, which could be used simultaneously for scientific and technological research and tourism, this time without Russia. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, the subscription button, and the notification bell to get notified when new videos are uploaded. From this channel, please share your thoughts about the world's most expensive infrastructure in the comment section below. Thank you.